Welcome into the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast, where we provide you with your weekly diagnosis of everything fantasy football. Whether it's season-long leagues, dynasty, DFS, or sometimes even IDP, we got you covered all year long. What's good? You know the vibes. Jon Jeune here at the real Jon J_FF, and it is October 28th, 7 a.m. Eastern, live here at Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast, and welcome back in for another episode. Again, it's week 9. Here we are again, another week, another wave of injuries, which we'll get into in a little bit. But we also have some bye weeks this week. Cleveland, the Jets, Philly, Tampa Bay, all on bye. Things are going to get even trickier this week on waivers. So today we're breaking down the top ads across all the major positions, who you need to prioritize, which players that can help you survive these injuries and these bye weeks, whether you're sitting in first place or trying to claw your way back into the playoff picture. This is the best week, I should say, to stay active and take advantage of every edge. But before we dive in, make sure you check out the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Patreon. You can join for free to access the FFDX cheat sheet or become an FFDX supporter for just $1 a month to get a weekly waiver wire article, which dropped last night, expanded rankings, and a Sunday morning Q&A where we go over lineup questions live right before kickoff. So just head over to patreon.com/FFDX. Again, the cheat sheet is free, 100% free. It doesn't cost you a thing. And you know, the FFDX supporter tier, I think, is the best value in the industry right now at just $1 a month. All right, chat. Let me know where you're tuning in from, who you're eyeing on waivers this week. If you have questions, always feel free to drop those in, whether you're watching live on YouTube, X, or Twitch. Or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, you obviously can't ask questions, but you can comment. If you leave a comment, I will do my best to respond in a timely fashion. Or if you're watching this on YouTube after the fact, I'll also, do my best to respond in a timely fashion. But the Week 9 waiver show starts now, so let's jump into it. Again, we talked about the teams on bye. Cleveland, Jets, Philly, Tampa. But we've got to talk about some of these injuries, man, and some of them just leaving me heartbroken. We'll start at the top with the Cam Scatterbull injury, man. That thing sucked. Scatterbull is obviously, he's a great football player. From a fantasy perspective, he's been such a joy to have on rosters. He double-digit PPR points basically every week since week 2. He was basically dominating that backfield. But the person, man, I mean, he's just so fun to watch. Interact with his teammates, interact with fans. Living in the New York area, just seeing him, at other sporting events like the Knicks game, just seeing how he walks around. I mean, he looks like he was one of these dudes that's from like Staten Island or North Jersey. So, he fit in very well around these parts. And so just seeing the energy he brought to the Giants and that team, I mean, being a Jets fan, it's like impossible not to see it and not to root for that guy. So obviously dislocated ankle, wishing him nothing but the best as he recovers from that. But yeah, man. And then on the Jets front, we had some terrible news with the passing of longtime Jet Nick Mangold at 41 years old. So, that was quite unfortunate there. Very young age, had complications with a kidney disease. And so, my heart goes out to him and his family and just wishing them nothing but the best there. Left behind his wife and 4 young children. So, it's really sad news. It was a really sad day in Jets Nation when that news, came about Sunday morning. But yeah, man, you just have to think that, the Jets getting their first win of the season in Cincinnati, Ohio, about, not too far from where Nick Mangold grew up in the Centerville, Ohio area. You have to imagine that, something special took place on that day. So, um, yeah, man, again, my heart breaks for Nick Mangold, and just seeing all his former teammates and Rex Ryan talk about him, and it was really sad, and it just made you think about the impact that he not only had as a player on some of the better Jets teams, right? Back to back AFC Championship Jets teams that he was a part of. That was pretty much, that was the highlight of my Jets fandom growing up. So, just really, takes you back to that moment. So, all right, not to get too somber here. Just felt compelled to say those words there about Nick Mangold. But the Atlanta Falcons quarterback Michael Penix, he's still day to day with a knee injury. Atlanta wide receiver Drake London, he was a surprise inactive. I mean, it was kind of trending that way when he, was downgraded. You never like a midweek downgrade; those are never good. And he was downgraded to um, questionable for Sunday's game. So that was, quite unfortunate there. That turned out that he didn't play, and then I think Atlanta blew up a bunch of people's survivor leagues there with with their, I guess, no show against the Miami Dolphins there. Anyway, Baltimore quarterback Lamar Jackson, he's expected to return back to week 9 versus the Miami Dolphins. There was a lot of hoopla about the his participation in practice, and the fact he was scout team, but he was full reps in scout team. But if you take full reps in scout team, you don't take your normal reps. That means that you didn't really take your normal allotment of reps, which means you're questionable. So I don't know. There was a whole thing about that, but he turned out to not play, which I thought was interesting. When we talked about, we had the waiver show last week, and he did not practice on Monday. Uh, I thought that was a little odd coming out of the bye week. But he was estimated participation as a full participant in practice on um, on this Monday. So the Baltimore Ravens play on Thursday here against Miami Dolphins. So he is expected back in week 9. So that's at least good news for Lamar Jackson and his fantasy managers. Um, Cincinnati quarterback Joe Flacco, he's day to day with the shoulder injury, suffered a shoulder injury on Sunday against the Jets. Did not miss any time with that game. Did have to run back into the locker room, and then came quickly back out. So don't expect. Well, I'm not expecting him to miss any time. And from what I've read and seen, he the expectation is that he will be okay. It's just something he has to manage for the next few weeks. Cleveland running back Quinshon Judkins, he suffered a shoulder injury, did not return to Sunday's game. Team is hopeful that he can return post-bye. Again, this is something that team does not seem to be overly concerned with there on that front. So we'll just have to see how that goes. Again, Cleveland's on bye this week, so they'll have fantasy managers will have another week to kind of sort this one out and see how it plays out. Obviously talked about Cam Scatterboo already. Philadelphia wide receiver AJ Brown, he was inactive on Sunday with a hamstring injury. Again, that was a bit of a surprise, but at the same time, he was he was questionable coming into that week. So there was a little bit of I guess trepidation coming into the week for him, and then ultimately he ended up not playing. So and then Philadelphia running back Saquon Barkley, he left his game with a groin injury. I mean, they were very much they were very much well ahead of the Giants in that game by the time Saquon Barkley left. So you're not really sure, like, was it due to the score and that's why we didn't see him again, or was it really that severe that that he had to kind of sit out there for the rest of that game. But the Eagles are on bye this week, so again, not something that we have to be overly concerned about this week, but just definitely something to monitor, going forward. So, all right, let's jump into the waiver show for real, for real. Let's talk about quarterbacks, and uh, hopefully, this is the last time I have to talk about this guy. I mean, I just want that rostership to just to be under, over the availability to be under 30%. Let's say that, right? So the rostership above 70%. But New York Giants quarterback Jackson Dart available in 37% of Yahoo leagues. Borderline QB1 again in week 8. That was pending the results of Monday Night Football. So going into Monday Night Football, he was the quarterback 12. So Mahomes probably did finish in the QB1 range. So that put him as the quarterback 13 most likely. But he scored at least 19 fantasy points in 4 or 5 starts this season. So he's now set to face off against the San Francisco defense that's allowing the 12th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks over their last 3 games. Origami Harvest with a question. Good morning, Origami Harvest. Would you drop Woody? I'm assuming that's Woody Marks for Tyrone Tracy, full PPR. My initial gut reaction is no, I wouldn't. I think Tracy will still have to deal a little bit with Devin Singletary being in that backfield. And fantasy managers, we may think, oh, well, it's Devin Singletary. He's not that good. But if the Giants like him, the Giants trust him, he'll be on the field in some capacity. I don't think that Tracy's going to take the full workload that we saw Cam Scatterboo have. Even Scatterboo, was ceding some work to Tracy a little bit and some to Singletary in some capacity. So I like Woody Marks' role. I like where he's at in that offense, and I feel like at this stage he can only take more work, not lose it. So that's my thoughts there on Woody Marks. Again, y'all, if you were in the chat, feel free to type those questions in, send them over, and we will answer them throughout the show. And Origami Harvest says, thank you. You are very welcome. All right, next up at the quarterback position, let's talk Aaron Rodgers. Available in 53% of Yahoo leagues, had a solid game from a fantasy perspective, has now had 3 straight games over 16.7 fantasy points, now faces an Indianapolis defense that's allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks over their last 3 games, right? We talked about Rodgers last week. I think we've talked about Rodgers 2 weeks in a row now. But the schedule down the stretch is actually pretty solid here for Rodgers. I like the outlook on him. So, if you are looking for a quarterback, maybe you've got a guy who's struggling or, some injuries here or a bye week, I think Rodgers makes a ton of sense. All right, let's move on to Cincinnati quarterback Joe Flacco, available in 39% of Yahoo leagues. So again, another guy we've been talking about for a couple weeks now. He's continued to be solid for us here. 3 straight games with at least 18.7 fantasy points. Have to see how that shoulder holds up through the week, but he's set to face off against a Chicago defense that's allowed an average of 19 fantasy points per game over their last 3 games to opposing quarterbacks. Next up, I was surprised to see surprised and also not surprised given his performance and injury, but Kyler Murray available in 38% of Yahoo leagues. He's looked less than stellar, right? One on the field, and for the sake of the other players on Arizona, some may want Brissett starting, right? When you see how Trey McBride and at times Marvin Harrison have performed with Jacoby Brissett in there, but gets a plus matchup against Dallas next week. And with his rushing upside, he could always be a viable option here, right? I have not been a huge fan of Kyler Murray over the last several years. After that, really good year 1, and then I think he had another really solid, like a really, really good year. When he tore his ACL, unfortunately. But outside of those 2 seasons, we really haven't seen, like that ceiling from Kyler Murray, right? It always feels like there's always some extra meat on the bone here. Uh, and so he's not a guy I targeted a ton coming into drafts this season, but at this point of the year, you've got a matchup here against Dallas. He's a rushing quarterback. Those that's always going to provide some upside here, right? We always look to those quarterbacks that have the opportunity or that have the ability, I should say, to use their legs. So uh, Kyler Murray in a plus matchup, I think it's definitely a viable play. Moving on, we got Seattle quarterback Sam Darnold available in 64% of Yahoo leagues. He's scored 15.8 fantasy points or more in 5 of 7 starts this season. Comes out of the bye, set to face off against a Washington defense that, going into Monday Night Football last night, allowed the ninth most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks over their last 3 games. And then this last guy I'm going to talk about, I was questionable whether I wanted to mention him or not, but Houston quarterback CJ Stroud, he's available in 44% of Yahoo leagues, gets to go up against Denver, which is like, okay, well, Denver's not really a great matchup, John. Why are we talking about CJ Stroud? But Denver's top player in their secondary, top player on that defense, maybe outside of Nick Bonito, is Patrick Surtain II. And he's going to miss several weeks with what looks like a pec injury. He got banged up a couple times in that game, one with his shin or his lower leg, and then another with what seems to be his pec, and it's a strain. So fortunately, it's not a very long-term injury, right? Where he has to miss the season or anything. It's not torn, but it is a strain, so he will have to miss some time, which I think, changes how Denver has to play defense a little bit. So Stroud has been solid, right? If you're desperate, you're in a deeper league, you need options here. You definitely look to CJ Stroud as an option. All right, let's move on to the running backs, and let's talk Chicago running back Kyle Monangai, available in 62% of Yahoo leagues. And just like that, just when you think that he can graduate to something more than an insurance policy running back, he shows you that he's an insurance policy running back. Not because of ability, right? I don't hear what I'm not saying, right? It's not like I think Kyle Monangai is not a good player. I think he's a good player, a very solid player. But DeAndre Swift is not going to give up any work in that backfield as long as he remains healthy. So, but again, good to note that Monangai is, still the back to own or to roster, I should say, outside of DeAndre Swift in Chicago. All right, moving on. Let's talk Arizona running back Bam Knight, available in 80% of Yahoo leagues. He's coming out of the bye, and we get some news on Monday evening that Michael Carter was released from Arizona. So that really just leaves Bam Knight and Amari DeMarcado as the two healthy running backs here for the Arizona Cardinals. Trey Benson is eligible to return from IR in week 10. So we know we at least get one more week of Bam Knight as the lead back, and that's in a plus matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. So Bam Knight's definitely, if you need a running back to start this week and potentially next week, Bam Knight is your guy. All right, moving on. Let's talk Houston running back Woody Marks. He's available in 34% of Yahoo leagues, continues to be involved in the offense, back-to-back weeks with at least 15 touches and double-digit PPR points. He should be rostered in all 12-team leagues, even some 10-team leagues, I think. But, yeah, he's a guy that we got to continue to just, trust that his role is going to keep growing if he keeps showing some quality stuff here. All right, next up, let's talk New York Giants running back Tyrone Tracy, available in 51% of Yahoo leagues. With the injury to Scadaboo, Tracy is the next man up in the backfield. Not going to bring the same production that Scadaboo brought, but I think he'll be a usable RB3 with some RB2 upside each week. Next up, let's talk New York Jets running back Isaiah Davis. He's available in 91% of Yahoo leagues. Now, the Jets are obviously on bye next week, so uh, Davis isn't going to help you next week, but had the great game on Sunday, 109 total yards, 2-point conversion, 17 and a half PPR points. Again, I've been adamant that I don't believe the Jets will trade Brees Hall, but if they do happen to trade him during the bye week, then Davis will get promoted essentially overnight. So definitely a solid, um, you know, option to pick up, as his value could grow even during the bye week. So moving on, let's talk Tennessee running back Tyjae Spears, available in 69% of Yahoo leagues. I can't believe that rostership is still that low. 3 straight games with at least 9 touches. Almost seen it to overtake the snaps from Pollard last week. Don't know if that was a function of the game script, but Spears is definitely more involved in the offense. And if it was a function of the game script, I got news for you. The Tennessee Titans are probably going to be major underdogs again. Oh, wait, who did they play? The LA Chargers. Yeah, there'll be some major underdogs. So Tyjae Spears definitely going to continue to have a role as a pass catcher if it was game stripped. I mean, Pollard still did lead the team in carries, but in terms of production, it was Tyjae Spears this week. All right, moving on. Let's talk Atlanta running back Tyler Algier. Now, look, I was of the frame of mind like it was available in 57% of Yahoo leagues. I was like, yo, you could play Algier last week, and scored a touchdown. I think the game script did not go how people thought it would go. Right, it definitely didn't go how I thought it would go. But he did outscore Bijan Robinson. Yeah, not great. But again, still the high leverage backup to to Bijan Robinson, so provides a ton of value there. Next up, let's talk Kansas City running back Brashard Smith. Again, was involved early as a pass catcher in week 7. Had the 14 carries in week 7 as well. However, Monday Night Football he was involved a little bit on the drives, but he didn't really touch the ball, didn't get the receptions, had a long run that was called back due to it was due to penalty. It was called back. He's got upside there. Also, Pacheco seemed to have injured his knee. It doesn't seem like it was like a season ending or a long-term injury by that matter, because the way he was celebrating on the sideline, I mean, I was happy for him. The fact that, I think he really thought that his season might have been over. And it looked like a pretty bad injury, but he was like visibly like cheering as he was getting the test on the sideline, right? These guys usually they have to wait for the MRI to confirm, but they can do the structural integrity test like on the sideline and determine whether a guy has torn his ACL or not. But he was very happy to have found out that he wasn't. So let's move on to the next guy on this list. Let's talk Dallas running back Jaden Blue, available in 90% of Yahoo leagues. Back-to-back games with at least 8 touches. He's one injury away from being the lead back in probably one of the most explosive, in one of the most explosive offenses in football. So definitely a guy worth keeping on our radar here. Let's talk Green Bay running back Emmanuel Wilson, available in 95% of Yahoo leagues. Had 15 touches in week 8 as he worked as the change of pace back with Josh Jacobs. Also, let's not forget, Jacobs has been dealing with an injury to his calf. So if it's ever aggravated, if the Packers want to relieve Jacobs of some of the workload, Wilson could always have a role here. So I think, he should be rostered in most 12-team leagues, as he would slot in as an RB1 instantly. All right, the last running back on this list that we'll talk about, let's talk about Philadelphia running back Tank Bigsby, available in 83% of Yahoo leagues. He seems to be the running back to roster behind Barkley. Again, the Eagles are on bye this week, but if Barkley's forced to miss any time, then Bigsby would be the next man up. He had 9 carries for 104 yards against the Giants. Looked good, as Bigsby has done in his time in the NFL. Just a matter of the opportunities here. So if Barkley does have to miss time, I think Tank, definitely steps into a larger role, at least on early downs. All right, let's move on to the wide receiver position. Let's talk New England wide receiver Kayshon Boutte, available in 60% of Yahoo leagues. Look, 3 straight games with a touchdown is going to be hard to maintain, but the targets and the yards were looked better last week compared to week 7. I think it was 5 targets. He had 75 receiving yards. So the matchup against Atlanta is just okay, right? We obviously saw what Miami was able to do, and we saw what Drake May and that Patriots offense were able to do in a tough matchup last week. But at this point, I don't know if it matters. If the matchup matters with the way Drake May is playing. Plus, they're at home this week, so I think they'll be just fine. Next up, let's talk Las Vegas wide receiver Trey Tucker. Yes, I know you guys are so excited to hear about Trey Tucker, available in 62% of Yahoo leagues, coming off the bye this week, so a bit forgotten, but comes back from the bye to face a Jacksonville defense, allowing the 6th most PPR points to opposing wide receivers over their last 3 games. And so he also could be one of the top targets on this team if Jacoby Myers is in fact traded prior to the trade deadline. Next up, let's talk Alec Pierce, available in 71% of Yahoo leagues. Look, we didn't get the big breakout performance that I thought that we would get from Pierce in the matchup. I mean, it was there. It was there. Still a solid day though in week 8, 69 receiving yards on 5 targets, and most of which were of the deep variety as we anticipated. But he now gets a Pittsburgh defense which is becoming one of the teams to attack with opposing wide receivers. Looks like we got another question here. Bailey Embling Jones, first time playing fantasy. I'm currently overloaded at wide receiver. Got JSN, Chase, Abuka, Pickens, Adunze, Sutton. Ooh, I love this. What running backs should I target? Currently have Achane, White, and Tracy. 8-man league. Thank you. Okay, so 8-man league, you probably have everyone in your league is loaded, right? So you have Achane, you have White, you have Tracy. White not really going to obviously he's on bye this week, and then once Bucky Irving gets back, he's going to relinquish that role. Maybe you go find, like, I would try to buy low on somebody, right? Like a Derrick Henry or a Saquon Barkley. Breece Hall, he just had a good game, so they might be less inclined to sell. But yeah, I think, and I know the next question is going to be, which one of these guys do you sell? Maybe like a Cortland Sutton. I think I would start from the bottom up, right? Like I don't want to get rid of JSN. I don't want to get rid of Jamar Chase. I don't want to get rid of Abuka. I think I prefer Dunze to Pickens, but I still want Pickens because of the offense that he's in. And then Cortland Sutton is fine. He's a fine player. But yeah, so I would try to buy low on a running back, right? Like maybe you take a shot on Genty, right? The Ashton Genty manager is probably frustrated right now. So that's and he's coming off the bye week, so you don't have to worry about future bye weeks. So I think that's a player it's a solid player to go get, and it probably wouldn't cost you a lot. Or maybe you go to the Bucky Irving manager and you see what they have available to them, and you offer maybe Rashad White there as a trade, and maybe see what you can get back. Rashad White plus Cortland Sutton, and maybe you can get back, like a Derrick Henry or something like that. But yeah, Bailey, welcome to fantasy. I hope it doesn't hurt you and cause you pain like it does to some of us. Anyway, let's move on to the next wide receiver on this list. Let's talk Tennessee wide receiver Chimere Dike, available in 92% of Yahoo leagues. He's simply hard to ignore at this point, right? He's been very good as a return man for them, right? I think at some point in week 7, I think he was leading the entire NFL in total yards. Just his ability as a kick returner. But the last 2 weeks has been called upon as a wide receiver, and he has delivered. So I'm curious to see what happens with Calvin Ridley moving forward. But DK deserves more playing time, as he's definitely played well. And Bailey says, appreciate that. Thank you. You are very welcome, Bailey, anytime. Denver wide receiver, next up. Denver wide receiver Troy Franklin finally hit. Yes, available in 63% of Yahoo leagues. Crushed it for us in week 8, as we called out last week. And honestly, what feels like all year at this point with Troy Franklin. We've been calling him out. But I was happy to see this one really come to fruition. I had him in several lineups, and so he came through in a big way. But this next matchup is against Houston. It's not that great on paper. Definitely not an exciting matchup to play him in. But the following one against the Raiders, that's a solid matchup. So that's one that we'll definitely look to. And when we brought him up like 4 weeks ago on the waiver show, I think this was the last of the span of matchups, right? We talked about the Jets, the Giants, the Dallas Cowboys matchup, and then we talked about this one. So I think that might have been more than 4 weeks ago. So it might have been like 6 weeks ago. It's crazy when you're in like the fantasy realm. It feels like time goes by so fast, but so slow at the same time. Anyway, let's talk Houston wide receiver Jalen Noel, available in 91% of Yahoo leagues. Another solid outing for Jalen Noel, back-to-back games with at least 6 targets and 63 receiving yards. Hopefully he continues to have a role in the offense moving forward, but we will need to track the status of Christian Kirk, as apparently there is a direct correlation between Jalen Noel being on the field and Christian Kirk's availability. So last but not least, at the wide receiver position, let's talk Green Bay wide receiver Christian Watson, available in 84% of Yahoo leagues, right? We've been talking about Watson for quite a bit now. Available, again, like I said, 84% of Yahoo leagues, but it was his first game back from the injury, the knee injury that he suffered last year, and he delivered 4 for 4, 85 yards, which kind of feels like almost a vintage Christian Watson performance there. I feel like the vintage Christian Watson performance would be like 3 catches for like $130 and like 2 touchdowns. But with Jordan Love and the way he's playing, and the arm audacity on Jordan Love, right? To attempt some of these throws that you're just like, what are you doing? And then you're like, oh, that's like a 60-yard completion. Okay. But yeah, so Christian Watson, I think, definitely want a piece of this Green Bay offense, and Christian Watson allows you to do that very cheaply. All right, let's move on to the tight end position, and Oronde Gadsden II, available in 39% of Yahoo leagues. As if folks didn't believe it was real, right? We now have 3 straight games with double-digit PPR points and back-to-back games with a touchdown. He has a role rest this season, and the next few weeks look really good in terms of the matchup here with Tennessee, Pittsburgh, Jacksonville. All teams that go into Monday Night Football are all top 13 right now, or I guess going into Monday Night Football, top 13 in terms of PPR points allowed to the tight end position over their last 3 games, right? If you've been listening for the season, Gadsden has been brought up several times, more than several times at least. since like week 3, I want to say. And he was featured on the matchup show 2 weeks in a row. So, yeah. So hopefully you are one of the 61% that have him rostered. If not, make sure you go ahead and make that happen. Moving on to the next tight end on this list. It's a weird tight end week, right? A lot of the guys that we typically have in this spot are on bye, right? Mason Taylor, who came through at a big game, he's on bye this week, so hard to call him out because you're not going to play him when he's on bye. Harold Fannin Jr. also had a big game. He's also on bye. I think he's had back-to-back big games now, but he's also on bye, so tough to recommend him. And then Cade Otton, Mr. Necessary, also on bye, so also hard to bring him up. So that's why we're going to have this ragtag team of tight ends here. But Denver tight end Evan Ingram, available in 42% of Yahoo leagues, snapped his streak at 4 straight games with at least 6 targets, but continues to be a solid floor option here, and he's a solid streaming option entering week 9 against Houston. Next up, we've got New Orleans tight end Jon Johnson. The undertake meme continues here for Jon Johnson, coming back from the fantasy dead after another double-digit PPR outing with so he will be another solid streaming option again this week. Next up, Cincinnati tight end Noah Fant, available in 96% of Yahoo leagues. He was just okay in week 8. 3 catches on 3 targets for 41 receiving yards, 44 receiving yards. But he looked early on like he was going to be on, have himself a nice day. But that game got weird, and the Bengals just kept running the ball. So, and throwing it to Ja'Marr Chase. It sounds like a pretty good formula, although they lost. But anyway, he gets to face the Chicago defense this week that's allowing the 10th most PPR points to the position over their last 3 games. So Noah Fant continues to be a solid option. I think, again, he's one that I only really want to play if Joe Flacco is the quarterback. And then last but not least, Chicago tight end Colston Loveland, available in 78% of Yahoo leagues, with Kmet out with a back injury this past week. The first-round pick saw an increased opportunity here, catching 3 of 5 targets for 38 receiving yards. But guess who he plays next? Don't look. You don't have to look, because you might get too excited if you're listening to this while you're driving. Or if you're at work, you might make a noise and people will realize, like, oh, you're probably listening to a really fun podcast. But I'll tell you, Cincinnati Bengals. Yes, that same Cincinnati Bengals defense that has hands down been the best matchup for opposing tight ends. Like, they might allow the most fantasy points to opposing tight ends on the season. I feel like every time I do this, right, every time I'm here, I look at the last 3 weeks and it's always Cincinnati. It's always Cincinnati. So, yes, he gets Cincinnati. So if Cole Kmet is out, even if Cole Kmet is not out, I'm still almost interested to just throw him out there and see what happens against Cincinnati. Cincinnati might just like, oh, here, take the ball. We'll give it to you. Get in the end zone. Go for it. Because it seems like nothing is working for them when it comes to stopping the tight end. Anyway, let's move on to our defensive special teams. And we've got quite a few options. And coincidentally enough, like 4 of them were on bye. I tweeted this out last night, and that's why you also need to follow me on Twitter. At the real Jon Jeune _FF. I tweeted out that there were like 3 defenses that were like, yeah, these are probably 3 of the top defenses that you would want to pick up off waivers. They were all on bye. You got them for free. You got them for free last night because they were all on bye. If you play, assuming you play in a league where you can add players or you can drop players from your bench after they've already played, because that's what, Yahoo does that, so you can drop players after they've already played, and these teams are all available. All right. Obviously, if you are on Patreon and you are in the FFDX supporter tier, then you probably read the waiver wire article and maybe jump to waivers and grab those guys. But first up, the LA Chargers, DST, they were not on bye. They just played Minnesota, so they're probably rostered in most leagues, but they're available in 34% of Yahoo leagues, 10.5-point favorites on the road against Tennessee. So, anytime we get an opportunity to play against Tennessee, we have to take it. And then LA Rams, DST, available in 61% of Yahoo leagues, 13.5-point favorites at home against New Orleans. They're probably my top option of the available ones, of the widely available ones. Detroit, DST, available in 48% of Yahoo leagues, and they are 8.5-point favorites at home against Minnesota. That one's interesting because I don't know who the quarterback is going to be, right? Carson Wentz, he's out for the season after having a shoulder injury, after suffering through that Thursday night game. But is it going to be J.J. McCarthy? Is it going to be Max Brosmer? Does it really matter? Yeah, Detroit. Next up, we've got Seattle. They are 3.5-point favorites on the road against Washington. This one is interesting because Seattle's a very good defense. Again, they are on the road, but they could be playing against Marcus Mariota. If they're playing Jaden Daniels, I don't know how much that changes it for me. I think I would take a look at the betting lines and see how much those move if we get the confirm that Jaden Daniels is playing. But they are been a solid defense, and I think you can't go wrong playing them. And they're probably a defense of like all these defenses. They're one that I want to roster rest of season. Next up, we've got Jacksonville. They're available in 93% of Yahoo leagues and 3-point favorites on the road against Las Vegas. So Jacksonville, they've been a very opportunistic defense. They're kind of boom or bust. But if you can't play one of the more highly touted options, and Jacksonville, they are widely available. So they make a ton of sense. All right. And I think that's all I got, guys. So, all right, y'all. That is going to wrap up the Week 9 Waiver Wire show. So, as we head into the stretch of the season, it's all about staying active, managing depth, making the right moves before everyone else catches on, right? That's why we try to get these players for free before we have to burn waiver priority, burn fab. So these are the weeks that separate the playoff teams from the rest. So stay sharp, keep working that wire. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, turn on the notifications on YouTube, turn on the notifications on X at the real Jon Jeune _FF, so that you know when we go live. You don't want to miss that Week 9 matchup show later this week, right? That's going to drop Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern. So make sure you are tuned in for that. Plus, if you are make sure you also check out the Patreon, right? Patreon.com/FFDX. You'll get access to the FFDX cheat sheet, which is 100% free, doesn't cost you anything. And then for $1 a month, you'll get access to the weekly waiver wire article, expanded rankings, and the Sunday morning, I say morning with quotation marks, air quotes, Sunday morning Q&A, all just for $1 a month. So appreciate everyone who tuned in live. Appreciate everyone who tuned in general, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or watching later on YouTube or Spotify, because that's a thing. But appreciate all of you. Much love as always. Good luck on waivers this week. Go get those wins, and I'll catch y'all next time. Peace.